Everyone. My name is Rachel Dixon. I'm a massage therapist and postural alignment therapist who lives on Nantucket. And I am going to do a class today on the PTX posture types. And I'm using the word PTX when you've often heard Egoscue because I've theoretically changed my the software that I use with postural therapy. And different companies have a different designation to which posture they call it. But theoretically, what we're going to go over today is what Egoscue might call it or what PTX might call it. But essentially, if you look in the world, you will find these postural deviations in everyone. So it doesn't really matter what one company calls it versus another. What really matters is how to correctly stack the body. So to start with this today, a little bit of a disclaimer. This is for informational purposes only. It's intended for you to be able to have information that you can use. Nothing should hurt. Should you be not sure whether these are safe for you to do, or if anything is uncomfortable, please stop, consult with a doctor. And any questions that you ask today, this is videoed, so just keep it pertinent to information that you wouldn't mind sharing with the world, and everyone, please keep things confidential. A little bit about me. I've been a massage therapist for over 20 years. And in that time, when I first became a massage therapist, massage corrected most people's chronic pain. And really in the past 20 years, that was what I was focusing on, chronic pain and chronic stress. But a couple of years into my practice, massage no longer took care of people's issues. It felt good. It was a short-term fix because in my 20-year career, people changed how they moved and people changed. So people started sitting a lot more and people started using devices. 20 plus years ago, people did not regularly have iPhones, Kindles, and or computers even regularly that they worked at. So this was a real significant difference in how people's bodies were used. Some parts were the same, some parts are different. So in looking to create solutions for my clients' issues, I had to look at other modalities that would accomplish it. So I still have as my highest license massage, but I've added lots of other certifications that help get to the root cause of why my clients might be having the issues that they come into. So most of my training came through Egoscue University, and that's who actually most people use for postural therapy. But I have changed my software recently to PTX because I like the platform better. And PTX has an affiliate link that you can sort of do via me, and or it can be totally driven by the therapist. So I would be a PTX licensed therapist, but certified under Egoscue. So there are three main types of posture, and we're going to go over the different ways of knowing which one you fit under. And then we're going to talk about basic quick fixes that might be able to help each of these postures if you fit into any of these categories. Next session, which is in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about the three most common deviations from this. So you can have a combination of more than one, but you tend to have a primary of one of these three. And then we're going to talk about other tools that you can use that might be able to be able to support you if you put each of these categories in a general. Now, of course, nothing fits perfectly in general, but a solid 80% typically fits into a general umbrella of how it helps people. So in the PTX therapy, they have, and if you got the little document, everything was sort of listed that I'm going over today is listed in this document. And if you happen to be watching this after, you can just email me and I could send it to you. But they have posture 1, posture 2, and posture 3. And if you compare it to any of the things I talked about with Egoscue, they have posture 1 as the same, and they switch posture 2 and posture 3 with Egoscue. But today we're going to go over the PTX. So when you look at posture 1, they're going to have some particular characteristics. But first, actually, let me go a little bit into the areas that we're going to look at when we're doing posture, and then we're going to look at the 3 postures and where they sort of clarify. So the theory behind most posture work is that your body is going to be stacked up properly on top of each other in 3 really different directions, and then we're going to look that the bodies that are stacked up properly and move properly typically don't have as much chronic or repetitive pain as people that are twisted, rotated, and unbalanced. So typically, we're going to look at a lot of things. We're going to look at the feet, okay? So we're going to look at the feet and we're going to say, okay, in which direction are the feet pointing? Are the feet pointing out? Are they pointing straight? Are they pointing in? Okay, in the perfect world, our feet are going to be pointing straight, and then we're going to look at our knees and we're going to say, okay, are our kneecaps pointing forward? Actually, you can see I'm a little bit knock-kneed, right? So if I stand like this, I tend to rotate a little bit in here. So we're going to look at the kneecaps. So we're also going to look at where our kneecaps are. Our kneecaps pointing forward? Are they pointing out? Or are they pointing in? Then we're going to look at the width. Okay, so we're going to look at the width. Do we have a really wide stance? Or do we have a very narrow stance? Okay, so a very wide stance is going to typically be someone that wants a stronger base of support. Okay, and or they might have their feet towards the center. Feet ideally should be below the hip bones. But if we're going to have our feet out like this, okay, we have widened our base of support. When we look at the hips, we're going to want to see at the top of the hips, are the hips equal? Now you can see for me, I'm kind of out today. You can see that this side, which is my right side, but possibly seeing it on the left, is higher than this side. Can you see that if I actually take the top of the iliums and I come across, you can see that this one is a little higher. Then we're going to look at the shoulders, and we're going to look at the shoulders and we're going to say which shoulder is higher and which shoulder is lower, okay? And then we're going to look at where our center of gravity is located. Okay, so do we have our weight shifted more to one side that might look a little bit like this? Okay, see how if I put something in the middle, it looks like most of my weight is to that side? It might also look in this. So we have a variety of ways that we might look, but we're going to think about where our center of gravity is. And there's our center of gravity with our joints stacked up. So from the side, we should theoretically be, our feet pointing forwards, but then our joints stacked up on top of each other. So we want our ankles with our knees over it, with our hips over that, with our shoulders and in through our ears, okay? A lot of people have a weight shifted forward, but this is our center of gravity. So we want to sort of see, are we stacked up or do we have differences that are sort of left and right? So the different posture types that we're going to start talking about are looking at the 3 primary deviations the 3 primary posture types. Now, you might have perfect posture, but almost no one does, because what is posture? Posture is really the result of how we hold ourselves in space because of how we move. And hardly anyone moves equally left to right, front to back, and side to side. We almost all have created habits where we've held backpacks in a particular way, or we always had our kid on one particular hip and then we did something else with our other, or we had the phone always in one side. So really our posture is telling the story of all of our injuries, all of how we've used, but if we don't introduce full range of motion or we don't get back to stacking our body properly, we tend to move from this improper position and get pain and injury. Most people, if they even have many injuries or many joint dysfunctions, but they introduce the proper movement and they stack their body properly, they will often not have pain. Not always. I'm not going to guarantee that someone's not going to have pain, but many, many people get to eliminate the pain that they have by properly stacking their body and properly acting, including the proper movement into their life. Any questions on that before we get started about the three main posture types? Okay, so if there's no questions on that, we're going to start with posture one. Posture one used to be the primary posture I would see in many of my clients because they were hard. I'm going to make generalizations, but hardworking and tight. And many people nowadays have not working as much physically. So a lot of times, not always, this might be someone who is a physical laborer who also sits a lot, but it is posture type 1. So posture type 1, okay, is going to have our hips tilted forward with an arch in our back, okay? So important to say that a posture type 1, the primary thing is that there is an arch in the back, and if we were going to look at the angle of the hips, we definitely have the arch in the back and the hips tilted forward. Typically, we are going to have a wider stance legs with our knees pointing out and our toes pointing out. Not always. Sometimes it might be a little bit of a bow leg, which I can't make happen. But we're often going to be wider. We're going to have that anterior tilt. And then we're going to usually have tight shoulders with our arms sort of rotated like this, okay? You can imagine that this might be like a football player, okay? So it often looks like sort of this posture right here, okay? So posture number 2, okay? The biggest clarification difference is at this pelvis, okay? So we had that anterior tilt with the posture 1, but with the posture 2, we're gonna have the posterior tilt. And see how my knees had to bend in order to get that posterior tilt? If you look at the picture that I've done on the posture 2 type, very commonly you will gonna see slightly bent knees, okay? Every once in a while you don't, but so we're going to have this tucked bottom, okay? We're going to typically have a minimal curve or a flat in the lower back. See how I had quite an arch right here, and then as I come right here, my back flattens out. Now my back has a big curve in it, so you can even see that how I've done this, I flattened my back. And then typically my knees are pointing inward, or you might be knock-kneed a little bit. And typically the head is forward, okay? So it's going to look sort of like this, but from the side, it might look like this. And typically, this is the type of person that we would have seen that was typically older. They also don't have a lot of glute, okay? Because this position right here is turning off the glutes, whereas this position is sort of turning on the glutes. But the posture 2 person typically has that C back that I've talked about. So they have their whole back is flexed. They're often tight. They're often a little bit weak in their posture. But the weakness comes from being stuck in a C as opposed to really being able to anteriorly, posteriorly tilt the pelvis and being able to flex and extend the back in the different parts. But often they have that C stuck position. And then you have posture 3, which is rotations. And to be honest, almost everyone has rotations in their posture right now because we tend to sit a lot and have a primary way of moving and don't introduce the other movements. So so a lot of times what will happen with that is we're going to see, okay, so when you have the pelvis that's higher than the other, and then you have the shoulder that's higher than the other, that indicates rotations. Also, theoretically, rotations are rotating. So my hips might be going in one direction, and then my upper body might be in another. And usually to go along with that, we're going to see that maybe one foot is going in one direction and then the other one in another, or one kneecap is going in one direction and one was another. If you were to look downward on someone, you would see that literally part of their body was rotated in one direction and part of their body was rotated in another. And that would theoretically be posture 3. So when you're creating a menu for people, an exercise menu, it's important to, of course, do exercises that are a little bit more ideal for you. So when I go over some basic ones that you might be able to do today, don't do any of them if they are not comfortable for you. I'm going to do downward dog today, and I can't do downward dog. So I'm also going to show you how you can accommodate it to make it better for you. And also the different postures, almost everyone has more than one posture type. You will have a dominant, and then you will have sort of secondary. Next sessions, we're going to go over almost all secondary ones. But the biggest factor of which one you have is, do you have an anterior pelvis or a posterior pelvis? And then are you rotated? So that's sort of what we're going to look today. So again, pelvis, our center of gravity, I'm really talking about this area right here, and how our hips and our low back are attached to each other. So an anterior pelvis, okay, is tipped forward with the curve in my back, okay? So again, tipped forward with the curve in my back. And the posterior one is I'm going to tuck my pelvis and my back is going to go flatter. My knees also bent. Some people can bend their knees a little bit less. For me, I'm really having to bend my knees to try to flatten my back, okay? And then we're going to look at how much of a rotation we have in our body. And then we can create the menu. But today's menus that I'm going to do are like quick fixes that really hit one or the other. And some of them are new to me. So I'm going to use my little sheet. I'm using some PTX exercises for postures 1 and 2. And for 3, I am doing some... For 3, I am doing some Egoscue ones. Now they overlap. PTX uses all of Egoscue's and they've adapted it a little bit. And some of them have called things a little bit differently. But really, any of the postural exercises look to stack the body properly. And there's multiple different ways of doing it, and there isn't any one right or wrong, unless it doesn't feel okay to you. And but we always try to get the simplest and easiest to accomplish what we're looking to do. So that's what we're going to look at today. So a lot of times, okay, so for posture 1, and that is, any questions before I get into the different posture exercises for the different posture types?
Rachel, it's Leslie. What did you say about when you first are diagnosing? You see whether there's an anterior or posterior pelvis, and then the second, what's the second thing you look for?
Do you have rotations or not?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll be going over it again because the first thing we're going to do is for that posture 1 type. So the posture 1 type, okay, typically is, now 20 years ago, I would have said it was typically the football player. It's also going to be perhaps the manual laborer or the person that works very physically hard, but spends a lot of time sitting as well. So my skinny husband who works real hard and has a very anterior pelvis. Okay, so he's got a wider stance, a very anterior pelvis, and really dominant in the shoulders. Okay, so he sits here with a very dominant type 1, but he isn't a football player by any means. He would be an ideal posture 1. Okay, so with posture 1, what we're really looking to do is unrotate those hip flexors. They tend to have very tight hip flexors and really dominant shoulders that are overworking. So the exercises that we're going to go over for the posture 1 quick fix is wall foot presses, ab crunches with block, standing arm circles, and air bench. Some of these you guys have seen before. 1 or 2 of them are absolutely brand new to me, including wall foot presses. So with wall foot presses, and I'm actually going to check my little manual to make sure we're doing it right. I'm going to get on my mat on the ground. I'm going to have my feet up sort of at a right angle, okay? And I'm going to relax my arm out to the side, and I'm going to press my feet into the wall and release them. So like 1, 2, release, 1, 2, release. While you do that, the slight arch that you have in the back, because if you are type 1, you're going to have that arch in your back. The arch is going to flatten ever so slightly and release, okay? You don't want to force your low back into it, but just allow your low back to press into the ground when you do this. So again, I'm pushing my feet into the wall and my back is going to relax or press into the ground, but I'm not pressing my back, I'm pressing my feet. And this is really going to get the quads to work. A lot of time hip flexors work, quads don't work, and I'm getting that back to relax a little bit. Then I'm going to take a block and I'm going to put it between my knees, okay? I'm going to keep this at the right angle. Now I'm going to put an equal amount of pressure between my knees. Now remember how with type 1 they have the wider leg stance and with feet that are pointed outright. Right now, up on the wall, I'm making sure that my feet are pointing straight up the wall, not out, okay? And I'm going to put equal pressure from left to right with like not all of my strength, but maybe 20, 30% of my strength. And this is going to help keep the femurs in a better position. And I'm going to do some ab work right now. Now with the ab work, okay, I'm going to have my hands behind my head. I'm going to look up at the ceiling. And I'm not looking to curl towards here. I'm looking to just lift my upper head about 2 inches. Okay, so I'm looking to lift my shoulder blades while I'm having, this is not easy actually, but you are going to have the equal pressure here and the lifting of like 2 inches right here. Now what you want to do is have equal pressure between the left and right. So you're not leaning to one side or to the other. What's interesting is that one often has a stronger leg than the other. I can feel that my left is having to work harder than my right to keep it equal. So I'm going to guess that my left leg is a little less strong than my adductors on my right. Okay, so now we're going to do standing arm circles. Everyone has seen these a lot, okay? So standing arm circles, we're going to stand hip width apart with our feet pointing forwards. I am going to have an active hand. This is called a golfer's grip. Okay, it's not sort of a weak hand, it's an active hand. I'm putting my arms out. It can be helpful in front of a mirror. You don't want to be up like this. You do want to be sort of level. So this might help my shoulders that are a little bit off, okay? I'm gonna squeeze my shoulder blades together. My elbows are locked. I'm not bent like this. And I'm gonna make little circles forwards. I'm gonna do this from the side in a minute so you can see me because I'm actually bouncing forward and backward. And this is making it a little bit of a core exercise because my back is moving like this, okay? Then we're gonna take it, my thumbs have been pointing forwards. I'm gonna point my thumbs back and I'm gonna make little circles in the opposite direction. So let me show you what that looks like from the side. So we're gonna come here and you can see that I'm bouncing a little bit. And we want to allow the bounce because it's keeping my core from going forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forward, backwards. And it's going to keep me being good for that. Now, air bench. Air bench, you come out here, okay? We're going to slide down the wall. Our feet are about, hip width apart. Our feet are pointing forwards. The difference here, I'm going to press my low back into the wall. My hips are higher than my knees. If this is too hard on your knees at any point, you can move up, okay? Less angle is a little bit less work on your quads. The further down you get, the more your quads have to work. However, always make sure your hips are higher than your knees and your knees are not over your toes, okay? Or beyond your toes. And now we're gonna press our low back in, not an arch. And my upper back is probably gonna move out a little bit, okay? And we're gonna hold this for about a minute, which I'm not going to do, a full minute. But the exercises that those do, okay? So that anterior tilt, it helps release it. Those legs that are rotated out like this, we're introducing with the presses, okay, so for the presses, we're introducing, reminding the back to posteriorly tilt. For the ab crunches with the block, we are reminding the wide legs to activate our inner thighs, okay, and activate our abdominals. A lot of times with that type 1, we have weak abdominals, really tight hip flexors. So we're releasing the hip flexors and we're getting those abdominals to work a little bit more. And then we're working on shoulder stability so that type 1 tends to have the anterior shoulders that are a little bit stuck right here. So we're asking them to stabilize and our upper body to work. And then we're finishing with the air bench, which turns the quads on. And a lot of times the quads need to get turned on a little bit in addition to the adductors with the type 1 posture. Any question on the type 1 posture before I go into type 2? Okay, so yes.
It's Joanne Lombardi. I do have one question about the air bench, the one that you showed. In some of your previous, I think the one on back problems and lower back, you did one from Egoscue that I do, where you lie on the floor and you put your legs over an ottoman or whatever. I put it on a bench, and then you're pressing your lower back in and taking your arms in like overhead. I feel it's the same, like, from what I can see from what you just did. I kind of feel it would be the same feeling or sensation. Is that a totally different type of exercise? I mean, I love doing that other one, and I kind of do a modified version of that air bench.
So air bench is a little bit different. So it sounds like what you're doing is static back with maybe overhead presses, or a static back, which looks like this. I'm about to get the chair anyway, so let me bring the chair over, okay? So a little bit different because static back is passive, okay? So I'm just going to lie here. I'm gonna put my legs here, okay?
Yes.
and I'm going to unrotate here, and I'm going to unrotate here. We're not really unrotating when we do the air bench. We're also significantly turning on our quads, okay? We're not doing anything with our quads right here. However, as far as what happens with the low back, in the air bench, I want to press the low back into the wall. With this one, I'm going to passively let the low back go into the ground. So there is a difference between the two. However, static back is one of my very favorite exercises, and I really love it, but they are quite different. A lot of times air bench is used to turn on quads for people that are really shoulder dominant or hip flexor dominant. So little bit different in the purpose. Both tend to be really good for low backs, okay?
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much. I think what I've been doing on the one with the chair, what's that one called? This one here?
Well, it's a type of static back, and then there's many different variations.
I think what I'm doing is I'm really pressing my lower back to get it flat, and I kind of feel like I feel a release, but maybe I'm not doing it passively. Definitely, it's just more like what you would do on the air bench, where you press your back in. So maybe
it's okay. It's okay to press your back in as long as it feels good. Theoretically, theoretically, static back is passive when it comes to the rotations, and then active somewhere else. So we might do knee squeezes or foot circles or something else. What is important with the static back, let me just show one thing and then I'll get into something else, is if you were to do static back with, so I'm going to unrotate here, my back is going to relax in, my shoulders are here. If I'm going to come here and I'm going to do this, right?
Yes.
If I'm short in part of my back, I might come here and then arch my back to be able to have the space to be able to accomplish this if I don't have enough shoulder space, okay? What we want to do is keep the back neutral on the ground, but it's more about the rib cage, okay? Not flaring the rib cage to accomplish the shoulder work that we want to do. And how that looks when I was standing, okay, is it's really common when people are looking to say lift their arms up, if they don't have enough space to go beyond here. Watch what I do right here. I'm gonna hyperextend my back, or I'm gonna flare out my ribs. And suddenly I've accomplished my arms going up. But we really want to buy the space in the upper back and the shoulders to be able to do that. But let's get on. If you have any questions, just let me know. But for right now, let's get on to posture 2. Because posture 2, theoretically, what we used to see with the posture 2, the most important thing, or the most significant factor of what. Does someone have a question? Okay. The most significant factor that you see in a posture 2, okay, is going to be that posterior pelvis. So we typically have that, a flat back and a rounded, and typically not very active glutes. Our glutes are a little bit flat, okay? So with a tight C back, someone's going to say, I'm really strong. You might be really strong, okay, up here, but you aren't very good at flexing and extending the spine, okay? And you're probably really, really not great at extending the upper back, okay? So when I'm talking about the extending the upper back, we're curved here, and then this is going to be extending, okay? So probably we're stuck right here, and we have a difficult time activating the extension up here, and most likely our head is stuck forward as well. Really, really common to have, neck injuries and our shoulder injuries, because we also get stuck in this position, really dominant with our shoulders, but we're moving our shoulders a lot in a very limited range of motion, and we would have a really hard time properly getting our arms up. So adductor presses sitting. They do this a little bit differently than I do. So I'm going to read it to make sure I do it like I have it right here. Okay. With these, we're going to sit in a chair, and you can see my chair. Oh, I forgot a strap. Ooh, I have a strap right here. Okay. So adductors are together, abductors are pulling apart. So I'm going to sit in my chair. Okay, I'm not going to sit in the middle. I'm going to sit in the middle, not all the way back or towards the front. I'm going to put this band around my legs. Now, I actually often prefer, this is a rubber band, which allows me to have movement. I often like rubber ones. In this one, if you had more of a firm belt, it would be a little bit better, because I theoretically want you to have the same pressure and stop, okay? So we're gonna sit in the middle of the chair with our feet pointing forwards, okay? So I don't know if you can see it, but my feet are pointing forwards towards the wall, okay? I've put the strap around my lower thigh, okay? I'm going to press out and release right here while I have, they didn't really say this in this, but I'm not going to be slumped this. I'm going to sit up on my hip bones, okay? And I'm going to have a little bit of an arch in my back, okay? I'm going to be as upright as I can. My feet are pointing forwards, and I'm going to open up my legs and release them, okay? But if I had, my band is stretchy. If I'd had more of a yoga mat, I would be like coming to a resistance of an end and release. So I'm going to do this. They recommend doing 3 sets of 20. Now, if you remember, the person who was the C tended to have the knock knees, right? They tended to be knock knees, or they tend to be femurs that were rotated in. So when you have femurs that are rotated in, you tend to be strong to inner and weak to outer. So this is why I'm looking to get a little bit of that arch in the back, stack my weight on my pelvis, and then remind my abductors to work. Okay. Now, then they recommend a minute of assisted hip lift. Okay. There's different ways that you can do this one, whether it's assisted hip lift or it's just hook lying hip lift. But depending, you can put one leg up on the wall, okay? You can have both legs. You want to have the feet pointing up. Then I'm going to want to take this leg, put it over this knee, and then I'm looking to open up into like a number 4, okay? And then I'm going to keep pressing it, that hip open for about a minute, okay? Now, your both butt cheeks or the sacrum should be on the ground. If this is so tight that your leg is up like this and that's the closest you can do, you can't really open up this hip, or you're so tight that there's like space between one or both butt cheeks by being able to do this, then you want to move back a little bit to give you a little bit more space. Another thing to observe is it equal left to right? This is very, very common with people with hip issues, like arthritis even, that you will notice a difference between left and right. And it's good to observe and then work on equalizing it for yourself. A lot of people with some hip arthritis will make themselves feel a lot better when they do exercises like this. If that is you, I've had whole classes on hip. This was part of it, but only part of it. There's other ones where you kind of unstick your femur as well. Okay, so we do this for 1 minute on each side. Tends to feel really good. Then it's downward dog. I'm going to show you an accommodation for this one because I can't do it, okay? Downward dog, when you think about the front and the back side of you, okay? Your backside has to stretch a lot to be able to properly get yourself all the way down to the ground. I have lots of space in rotations. I do not have a lot of space in my back line. So I'm going to show you, in the perfect world, okay, you might be able to be on the ground. I'm going to do this improperly. You might be able to be on the ground, okay, with my arms straight, being able to curl my toes under. Actually, I'm doing it okay. My heels are not touching the ground, but that's okay. I'm pressing in. I have a little bit, I'm not curling my butt a little bit. My hips are a little bit tilted like this, and then I'm pressing away from the ground, okay? So it sort of looks like this. This is not bad, but I probably am a little bit not enough space in my pelvis. So what I could do, if you cannot reach the ground, or if it's too much for your shoulders, okay, is to find a block or something that is going to work for you. So you could even come here, okay? What you're looking for is keeping an extended back. My toes are pointing forward. My hips are pointing forward. See how my neck is neutral? And do you see how my back has like a curve kind of like this as opposed to a curve like this? So I'm not curved like this. My back is extended. So this would be also excellent for that person instead of a downward dog. But it's an accommodation of a downward dog. Whereas downward dog would look, curl my toes under, and I'm going to press a little bit more on my upper body. But theoretically, if you have bad shoulders, do the other one. Okay, and then the last exercise they have, heel raises with the block. Now here's the thing. Type 1, we were looking to release our hip flexors. With this exercise, we are looking to activate our hip flexors. Our hip flexors, stability, we're talking our psoas and we're talking our iliacus, okay? Quads are secondary hip flexors, primary hip flexors, okay, are going to be our psoas and iliacus, okay? So I'll do this from both sides. We're going to put a block between our knees. I am sitting up. I'll show you from this. Actually, you're not going to see me. Good enough right there. Let's see if you can see my feet. Okay, yes, okay. So we're going to put a block between our knees. We're going to sit in the middle of the chair, okay? Our toes are pointing forward, and we're rolling our hip forward. So I'm not slumped back. I'm rolling up. I'm sitting on my sit bones, okay? I have an arch in my back. Okay, I'm squeezing a little bit between the knees. Now, I'm going to lift the heels up and put them back down again. Now, I am not doing it by pressing my toes in, okay? I am not contracting my calves to do this. I am using the muscles right here. So the movement is really small, okay? I am not pressing my toes in. I'm just lifting my heels by using the hip flexors, which are, they're not really your stomach, they're to the side of it. But this is going to activate those hip flexors. Hip flexors are what pull that pelvis and create an arch in your low back, okay? If you have super tight and short hip flexors, this is not for you. Sometimes people have long and weak ones, and this could be for you, okay? So any questions? And so the exercises that we did here were okay, so let me just show you from the side though, so you can see this. Okay, because we're gonna come here and I'm slumped like this. See, my feet are pointing forward. Now I'm gonna sit up, see how I now have created at least a bit of an arch into my back and I'm upright. And now I'm gonna lift my heels, but it's not by pressing my toes into the ground or contracting my calves. It's by lifting from right here while I'm pressing it on the knees at the same time. Now, if you remember, for the type 1 person, we had that C posture. Guess what pulls and creates that hip flexors, or the arch in the back is from those hip flexors. So that's what we're looking to turn on with the heel raises with the block. Any questions on the type 2 posture? Now in Egoscue, the type 2 posture was really a type 3, but it's really about that posterior pelvis and that C back. Any questions on that before I go into the rotational posture? All right, so if not, we're gonna go into the routine quick fix, which I've gone over like so many times because they're some of my favorite. This is great for rotations. It introduces movement to both sides. It does require that you have enough space in your back. If you have a major disc issue, this might not be great for you if you're in acute discomfort. If you work into it with a disc issue, it's fine. Meaning, it's not to say that people with disc issues can't do this. It's just we don't want to aggravate rotation in an acute disc issue. Okay, so we're going to do upper spinal floor twist, and we are going to do hip crossover stretch, and then, whoops, I'm going to make sure you guys can see me. Okay, so I'm going to do it from 2 directions so you can see. So upper spinal floor twist, it's a little bit of a stability and a little bit of a rotation at the same time. So I'm going to lie here on my side. I'm at right angles right here, okay? My head is sort of down. I'm going to keep active right here, and I'm going to rotate in my upper back. So now I'm going to allow this to just stretch. If you are like way right here because you're tight, you can sometimes put a little bit of a pillow and just work to be able to rotate all the way. This is asking this to work and asking my upper back and pecs to stretch a lot. Now, I should come forward because, there we go. Now I can go all the way to the ground. I have lots of space in this direction. As you can see with downward dog, I did not have a lot of direction space in my back line. What this looks like, then you come back and then we do the other side. So I'm going to be at a right angle. I'm going to keep my knees sort of together. So my left hand is going to hold my knees and I'm going to come right here. You can see I'm a little tighter to this side because I always rotate to the other direction more dominantly, but you can see that I'm not letting my legs twist, but that I'm stretching and I'm getting closer and closer and closer to the ground. Oh, that feels good. Okay, what that looks like in this position is, I think you'll see it better. Yeah, okay. So what it looks like in this position is I've got the right angle, okay? I'm gonna keep this hand here because I don't want my hip to stretch. I could come here and if I'm tight, I can just stretch by letting my legs separate, but I'm really working strong here and I'm working strong at the knee. So these are active, these muscles, and the upper body is stretching. See how my knees are sort of staying together? I'm sort of pressing my knees together and I'm working right here in my hip a little bit. And then the rest of me is stretching. Okay, hip crossover stretch. So we're gonna lie on my back. They call this hook lying. I'm lying on my back, my knees are bent, okay? I'm gonna put my leg over this knee. And only do this if you actually have the space to open up into a number 4. If you are tight and you really can, you're so tight that your like leg is up here or your leg is right here, you should not add the stretch into your back. But say you can open up pretty decently, okay? And then we're gonna take this, I'm gonna place this on the ground, okay? So my left leg is resting. My right leg, I'm gonna actively open it, okay? Then I'm gonna look in the other direction. So now I have a rotation at my hips, and I have a rotation into my low back as well. But again, the assisted hip lift, if you can't get that number 4 stretch really well, work on the number 4 stretch, then add this, okay? All right, so what it looks like on the other side. So I'm here, I'm gonna look in this direction, but I'm actively working to open up into a number 4. Okay, and then since almost everyone needs help with extension, and we're gonna do static extension position. So we're gonna come on all 4s. I've got my knees under my hips, I've got my shoulders under my hands, or my hands under my shoulders. Then I'm gonna move my hands about 6 inches forward. I'm going to shift. So now my shoulders under my hands again, but do you see how my hips are a little forward of my knees, okay? And I'm going to extend everything. So now I'm gonna arch into my back, I'm gonna arch into my shoulders. See how I'm sort of extending everywhere, but then I'm gonna flex my head. So I'm gonna let my head come forward. It's gonna put a little bit of a stretch on my neck. And it's a lot of work. You actually feel a lot of this in the shoulder, but it's making the hips work a little bit and reminding the back to extend. You would hold this for a minute. This one can be a little bit hard for people if they have shoulder issues. So there's other things that we could do instead. Any questions on that? We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to go over different tools that are helpful for the different posture types.
Under that, it's Leslie again. Under that
Yeah.
static extension position you just showed us,
Mhm.
I have done that in various classes. The instructors really want me to pull up on my abs and so that my back is flat. Your back had a curve.
That's a good question. I'll look into that. With anything and everything, there's different things that you can accomplish with any of these. I find that almost everyone is stuck more in flexion than in extension, no matter what posture type you have. So in the posture 2, C curve back, you're stuck entirely in flexion typically. For the, if you have a curve in your low back, almost everyone still has a really tight, rounded upper back. I've seen 2 people my entire life that were walking around with the opposite of the C curve, which was an entirely extended back. And it was like, I looked at them and I thought, what is different? Like, it was so uncommon to see. It's been 2 people my entire life where I've seen stuck in extension. So people are typically either stuck in like the solid C curve, or they've got the solid curve on the top and the curve in the back. Every once in a while you see someone that's like stuck in extension, which might look like this, okay? But you hardly ever see someone walking around like this, you know? But I'll look into it to see if I'm describing it a little bit incorrectly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So tools. This tool is the gem of this entire class, because this is what I have found to practically send my clients home with that has made all the difference with their maintenance at home. And it is general. It might be different for you, but almost everyone will benefit if you had this. So tools like a foam roller. If you have a posture 1, you are most likely going to have a very tight, rounded upper back. You are going to be tight in the front of the legs and the quads, and you're going to be really tight in the calves. And foam rolling those 3 areas can be really, really helpful. If you have a posture 2, that C curve that's really stuck, okay, you have trouble just straightening up, and you definitely have trouble flexing and or really extending the spine, flexing, extending the spine, flexing the hips. So what can be helpful with a foam roller, okay, is to lie on the foam roller like this. Now, this is actually beneficial for everyone, right? But I especially find that the type 1s already have that flexed hips, right? And extended spine. But the C curve back doesn't, okay? So when you're lying here, you can already lie here and relax. And now those shoulders that are stuck forward can relax out like this, okay? And then you can also work on getting your spine. So I'm just working here, and I'm working on flexion and extension of just my sacrum while I'm balancing core-wise. Okay, you could fall off this way, you could fall off this way. My arms are here. It's not even far if I fall off. And you could go in a half a roller, but I'm balancing a little bit. So I'm stretching my pecs. My back is almost going to extension because I'm flat now. But then you can work on, so your back tends to want to go like this. What we want to do is get those hip flexors to work so that we work those guys. So that can be really helpful for anyone, really, but especially the posture 2. All right, posture 2 people often have feet that aren't working as well as they should. So any of the foot stimulation exercises, okay, the light ball rolled over the bottom of the foot tends to be really helpful so they feel the ground a little bit better. We are seeing a lot more teenagers with that C curve back because they never spent time on their stomach. So here's another thing. If you're at the beach or you are reading in bed and you have that really C curve spine, I would encourage you to, or when you have kids that are stuck in like that C, working on computer devices all the time, make them come right here. I'm going to go pigeon-toed right here. I'm going to come here. I'm going to sink between. Now my neck is neutral, okay? I'm up. I can hold a book. I can hold a device. I could even do a computer like this, okay? This is going to be a really great way to introduce extension into the back, neutral neck, okay? Instead of being stuck like this, I have a neutral neck, and I'm able to do work or read a book while introducing a different type of movement than when so many kids are, you know, stuck on devices working like this. I also have posture 3, rolling patterns. So I have a whole link to original strength rolling patterns. So people with the rotations in their body, they rotate in one direction a lot typically, and they don't equally rotate in the other. And the rolling patterns are really great to add playful movement that's going to introduce movement in all directions. So what that might look like is this. Okay, so we're going to either lower body or upper body introduce, and there was a whole class I did on thoracic rotation. So this is what it looks like for the lower body, and this is what it looks like for the upper body. I'm going to let my upper body go. It's really hard sometimes for the upper body to do it entirely properly and not use your legs to push off, for me anyway. I would say that's probably true of everyone. But what we're doing is where someone has a dominant movement pattern like this, we're introducing the opposite in a movement pattern, which is a neurological training of our brain as well. So lots of information today. Any questions before we finish? And the next session, we are going to work on some very common deviations to these initial 3 postures. They tend to go hand in hand with them.
Leslie, again, on posture 1 with the foam roller, are you talking about us lying on the foam roller, or are you talking about rolling the foam roller over your quads or over
Okay, let me show you. I mean, actually, you can do that as well. Let me grab something. So you could, okay, there's so many different tools, right? But you could take something like this and release along your quads, all right? But what I was referring to in this thing was, I'm going to come here and I'm going to work on my quads.
I know that one, that hurts.
Yeah. Okay, so quads, calf. Calves tend to be really tight in the type 1, okay? Calves, and then upper back. So like your rib cage area, okay? So I'm gonna work in here and or to the side. Well, I'm kind of stabilizing here. I'm not arching my low back with this. I'm more moving from my legs. All right, any additional questions? We can go over some of these also if you find you have questions next time.